What? What are you doing in my house? Nadia, please, just let me explain.
Explain what? When you are wearing my dress and standing in my living room.
Nadia didn't return to Nairobi to cause a scene. She thought she was building a family.
Nadia didn't return to Nairobi to cause a scene. She only wanted to open the door, set down her suitcase, and hear her husband say, "You're finally home." 3 years in Dubai working night shifts, sending every coin back to build this house. She thought she was building a family. But when the door opened, what waited for her wasn't an embrace. It was a silence heavy as stone. And the panicked eyes of the best friend who once shared meals with her, who prayed with her every night. Inside that house, everything felt familiar, yet nothing belonged to her anymore. Nadia didn't answer right away. She just stood there, her hand still gripping the handle of her suitcase, her eyes fixed on Halima. The living room suddenly felt unfamiliar, even though every wall, every brick had been built with the money she sent home month after month. A soft breeze slipped through the window, making the curtains sway gently, and Nadia realized that wasn't the curtain she had chosen. She stepped inside, slowly, very slowly. Halima took a step back on instinct, as if she herself didn't know what place she held in this story anymore. "Nadia, this isn't what you think." Her voice trembled, but not enough to hide the uneasiness. Nadia didn't respond. Her eyes scanned the room. The sofa had been replaced with a newer, lighter one. On the table were 2 glasses, one still marked with lipstick. A pair of women's slippers lay by the door. Not hers. Small details, but enough to expose a life she never knew existed. "Where is the key?" Nadia asked, her voice low and steady. Halima blinked. "What?" "The house key. How can you open the door while I can't?" A simple question, but no answer could be light enough to say out loud. Halima looked down at her hands, then turned away. That single moment of avoidance said everything. Nadia nodded faintly, as if she understood. Not the kind of understanding that makes you angry, but the kind that makes your heart go cold. Outside the gate, the sound of Nairobi traffic blared relentlessly. The city was alive, loud, and indifferent to a woman who had just lost something enormous right at her own doorstep. "Where is he?" Nadia asked. He's not back yet," Halima replied softly. Nadia glanced toward the staircase. The bedroom door was slightly open, a stretch of darkness behind it, as if waiting for her to step in. She pulled her suitcase inside and placed it neatly by the wall, a habit from living away too long. Everything had to be organized, controlled. Only her life was no longer that way. "How long have you been here?" she asked, still not looking at Halima. Silence stretched. "Almost 2 years." 2 years. Nadia closed her eyes for a second. No tears, no screams, just a deep breath, like she used to take before a long hospital shift. What does 2 years mean? It means while she was working herself to exhaustion in a foreign land, another life had quietly begun here, in her own home. "Did you ever think about me?" Nadia asked. Halima choked on her words. I thought you weren't coming back." Nadia let out a soft laugh, a laugh with no trace of joy. "So you replaced me?" "No, it's not like that." Halima shook her head, tears starting to fall. "At first I was just helping him. Then everything went too far." "Nothing just goes too far on its own," Nadia said gently. "Everything is a choice." The words weren't loud, but they carried weight enough to quiet the room. Nadia took a few more steps inside. She stopped at the wall where their wedding photo used to hang. It was gone. In its place was an abstract painting, beautiful but empty. A house isn't built with money alone, it's built with memories. And when the memories are replaced, it stops being a home. "Do you know what hurts the most?" Nadia asked, turning to face Halima. Halima couldn't meet her eyes. "It's not that you're here, it's that I trusted you like family. Halima's tears fell harder, but Nadia didn't step forward to comfort her. Not because she was cruel, but because some lines, once crossed, can never be restored. Outside, headlights began to spill through the windows. A car pulled up at the gate. Nadia looked out. Her heart didn't race. No excitement. Just a strange feeling calm to the point of coldness. He's back, Halima whispered. Nadia nodded slightly. Good. She straightened her posture, adjusted her clothes, as if preparing to step into another shift. But this time, there was no patient to save. Only the truth, waiting to be spoken. If you were Nadia, would you face it or walk away right now? Comment face it or walk away. The gate outside had just closed. Familiar footsteps echoed across the tiles. Slow, heavy, unhurried. Nadia stood still in the middle of the living room. She didn't move forward. She didn't step back. She just waited. Khalid appeared at the doorway. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, his car keys still in his hand. When he saw Nadia, he froze. Not because he was surprised, but because he wasn't prepared for this moment. Nadia, he said, his voice low. There was no smile, no rush to embrace her, just an invisible distance stretching between them. I'm home, Nadia replied. Calm, so calm it surprised even herself. Halima stood behind, silent. 3 people, 1 room, yet no one knew where they were supposed to stand. Khalid set his keys on the table. Why didn't you tell me you were coming? A normal question, but completely wrong in this moment. Nadia looked at him, her eyes no longer soft. Did you need time to prepare? Khalid didn't answer right away. He glanced at Halima. Just a quick look, but enough for Nadia to see these two had grown used to understanding each other without words. A familiarity she was no longer part of. We need to talk, Khalid said. Yes, Nadia nodded slightly. Right here, right now. Halima took a small step back. Maybe I should go outside. No, Nadia said firmly, but without raising her voice. You stay. If this story started with you here, it should end with you here. No one objected. Khalid let out a long breath and pulled out a chair to sit. But Nadia remained standing. She didn't want to sit. Not now. Go ahead, she said. Khalid looked up. You left for 3 years, Nadia. The words dropped, like an attempt to rewrite everything. Nadia tilted her head slightly. Left? You left me here alone. Everything fell on me. The house, the work, the pressure, he said, his voice hardening, as if he had rehearsed this argument long ago. Nadia didn't interrupt. She let him finish. You changed, Khalid continued. Every time we spoke, you sounded tired. You weren't the same anymore. A pause. Because I was working 1-2-hour shifts at the hospital, Nadia replied, to send money back here. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word was clear. Khalid looked away. Halima suddenly spoke, her voice trembling. He said, You didn't want to come back anymore. Nadia turned to her. And you believe that? Halima didn't answer immediately. Tears slipped down quietly. He said you had a new life, that you were only sending money out of obligation. Nadia let out a soft laugh, a laugh with a trace of pain. So you decided to replace me? No. Halima shook her head. At first, I was just helping him. The house was too big. He said it wasn't safe. And then slowly, nothing slowly happens without choice. Nadia cut in. Every day you stayed here was a choice. Halima fell silent. Khalid stood up. Don't put all the blame on her. Nadia looked at him. Then who should I put it on? No one answered. The air in the room grew thick. Outside, the distant calls of street vendors drifted in. Life went on, as if this house wasn't breaking apart piece by piece. Do you love her? Nadia asked. A simple question. But it slowed Khalid down. He looked at Halima, then back at Nadia. Yes, he said. No hesitation. Halima burst into tears. But this time, not out of fear, because she too, had just heard the truth clearly. Nadia nodded slightly, as if she had already known the answer. That's enough, she said. Khalid frowned. Enough for what? Enough for me to understand. I'm no longer in this marriage. No shouting. No tears. Just the truth, spoken plainly. Nadia walked to the table, placing her hand on the cold glass surface. But there's one thing I need to make clear, she said slowly. This house, Khalid said nothing. The money for this house came from me. Nadia continued, piece by piece. Do you still have the messages? Khalid tensed slightly. That was money you sent to your family. Family? Nadia repeated. Or a shared investment. Halima looked at Khalid. For the first time, doubt appeared in her eyes. Khalid didn't answer. And that silence began to reveal another story, not just about betrayal in love, but something deeper, more real, and far more dangerous. If you were Nadia, would you keep pushing for the truth or stop right here? Comment, continue, or stop? Khalid didn't answer. He just stood there, his hands clenched, his eyes avoiding hers, as if Nadia's question didn't exist. But in that small room, silence sometimes spoke louder than words. You staying silent means you know exactly what I'm talking about, Nadia said. Not harsh, not loud, but clear. Halima looked from one to the other. She was starting to realize this story was not as simple as she had believed. Khalid, you told me this house was yours, Halima said softly, her voice no longer steady. Khalid turned to her, slightly irritated. My name is on it. The documents say so. But where did the money come from? Nadia asked. A very practical question, and also the one no one wanted to answer. Nadia stepped closer to the table and opened her phone. The old messages were still there. The transfers, the notes, every number, every date. Here, she said, turning the screen toward them. March 12, 50,000 shillings. June 2, 120,000. All clearly marked. For completing the house. Halima stared at the screen. Her eyes widened, as if she was seeing a piece of truth she had never imagined before. Khalid? She called his name, her voice unsteady. Khalid exhaled sharply. That was money a wife sends to her husband, not a business contract. So when I sent money, did I have the right to know how it was being used? Nadia asked. I used it to build this house, this home, this family. Which family? Nadia asked again, this time looking directly at Halima. That question made Halima lower her head. Her shoulders trembled slightly. The atmosphere in the room began to shift. It was no longer a confrontation between two women. It was a truth slowly unfolding about a man who had told two different stories to two different people. You told me she had changed, Halima said, her voice fading. You said she didn't want to come back, that you were just trying to hold everything together. Khalid didn't deny it. Nadia nodded faintly. And to me, you said things were hard, that you needed more money, that you were holding the family together. A long silence followed. Two stories, two versions, but only one truth. You weren't abandoned, Khalid, Nadia said. You just weren't patient enough to wait. And what about you? Khalid shot back, his voice rising. You left for 3 years. Did you think a marriage could survive on money alone? Nadia looked at him. For the first time in the entire conversation, her eyes flickered slightly. Not out of weakness, but because she was thinking. No, she said. A marriage doesn't survive on money alone. It needs honesty. Khalid gave a bitter laugh. You weren't honest either. You said 1 year, then it became 3. Yes, Nadia nodded. I was wrong about that. I thought I could endure a little longer, so things would be better later. She paused, took a slow breath. But my mistake does not give you the right to betray me. The words fell softly, but they carried weight too heavy to argue against. Halima wiped her tears. I I didn't know it was like this, she said, almost whispering. I thought he was just lonely. Loneliness is not a reason to cross boundaries, Nadia said. No blame, just truth. Halima fell silent. For the first time, she was no longer standing on Khalid's side. Khalid noticed. His expression shifted. The confidence he had before began to fade. So what do you want? He asked Nadia. A practical question. Nadia didn't answer immediately. She looked around the house. Every corner, every detail, the things that were once her dreams, now just evidence. I want clarity, she finally said. Not arguments, not blame, just clarity. Clarity about what? Clarity about the money, about the house, and clarity about what we still are to each other. No emotion, no hope, just awareness. Outside, the rain began to fall softly. Nairobi at night was still loud, but inside that house, everything slowed down. A relationship was coming to an end. But before it ended, it needed to be faced without hiding, without avoidance. Because sometimes, the truth is not there to fix things, but to end them the right way. If you were in this situation, would you choose to hold on or let go? Comment hold on or let go. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping steadily against the glass. In the living room, no one spoke for a few seconds, as if each person was quietly trying to piece together what had just shattered. Nadia was the first to break the silence. Let's continue talking about the house, she said, her voice still carrying that unsettling calm. Khalid frowned. I already told you. The house is in my name. It's clear on the documents. The documents may be clear. Nadia nodded slightly. But the source of the money doesn't just disappear. She opened her phone again, but this time not to messages. It was a file of transactions, numbers, dates, not emotions, just data. I'm not speaking from feelings, she said. I'm speaking from what can be verified. Halima looked at the screen. She didn't understand every number, but she understood enough. Nadia wasn't making this up. Khalid, you told me you handled everything financially yourself, Halima said, her voice no longer steady. Khalid turned to her, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. I did. You can see that. But this money, Halima pointed at Nadia's phone. It's not yours. The words were like a cut. Not deep, but enough to reveal what had been hidden. Khalid fell silent for a moment, then exhaled sharply. So what do you want, Nadia? You want everything back? No, Nadia shook her head. I don't want to take back what's already gone. She placed her phone down on the table. I want fairness. 2 simple words. But they made the entire room feel heavier. Fairness how? Khalid asked, his tone defensive. Nadia looked at him. You know exactly how much I contributed. I'm not asking for more, but I won't accept being treated like I never existed in this house. Khalid let out a dry laugh. Your name isn't on the papers. Yes, Nadia nodded, and that was my mistake. She didn't avoid it. She didn't blame anyone. She owned it. I trusted without securing strong legal proof. That's my responsibility. That statement surprised Halima. She hadn't expected Nadia to say that. But that doesn't make you right, Nadia continued. It only means I was wrong. To trust the wrong person. Silence settled again for a few seconds. Outside, the rain softened, but inside, the truth was becoming clearer. If necessary, Nadia said, I will work with a lawyer, not to create a scene, but to make sure everything is properly recognized. Khalid looked at her. For the first time, he didn't see a weak woman standing there. He saw someone who was ready to stand up for herself. You're going to sue me? He asked. No. Nadia shook her head. I'm going to protect what is mine. 2 ways of saying it. 2 very different meanings. Halima sat down, her hands clasped together, trembling slightly. I didn't know it was like this, she said quietly. I thought This was a life you two had already ended. Nadia looked at her. No anger, no blame. No one ends a marriage by silently disappearing, she said. Only someone else chooses to step in before it's truly over. Halima lowered her head. This time, she didn't argue. Khalid paced a few steps across the room, clearly more unsettled than before. All of this doesn't have to become such a big issue. Yes, Nadia said. If from the beginning you had chosen to tell the truth. That sentence made Khalid stop. Not because he was being challenged, but because there was nothing left to say. A simple truth, without lies. None of this would have happened. Nadia took a deep breath. I didn't come back here to argue all night. I'm tired. She looked toward the staircase. This living room may not be mine anymore, but at the very least, I still have the right to sleep in the house I helped build. Khalid didn't stop her. Halima didn't say a word. Nadia pulled her suitcase and walked up the stairs. Each step was light, but firm. No hesitation. Before opening the bedroom door, she paused. She didn't turn back. Tomorrow, we'll talk properly. With a third party. With documents. No emotions. A very real, very practical way to handle things. The door closed. Downstairs, Khalid stood still. Halima remained seated. Two people. But for the first time, they were no longer on the same side. Because once the truth is revealed, relationships built on lies begin to collapse on their own. If you were in this situation, would you stay silent to keep the peace, or speak up to protect yourself? Comment, stay silent or speak up. The panic from the night before was gone. What remained was a cold, sharp clarity. Nadia sat on the edge of the bed, opening her phone again. She didn't look at photos. She didn't reread old messages. Instead, she opened a record of her expenses, a file she had quietly kept for 3 years. Dates, amounts, purposes. Not perfect, but enough to prove one thing. She had not disappeared from this marriage the way others were trying to claim. A soft knock sounded at the door. Nadia, are you awake? Khalid's voice. She didn't answer right away. She stood up and opened the door. Khalid stood there, his eyes tired. The certainty he had the night before was gone. I think we should talk, he said. We will, Nadia replied. But not just the two of us. Khalid frowned. What do you mean? I've called Omondi, she said. He'll be here in an hour. The name made Khalid pause. Omondi, the family's old friend, a lawyer, someone not easily swayed by emotion. You're that serious? Khalid asked. You should have been serious from the beginning, Nadia answered. No anger, just honesty. Downstairs, Halima was already sitting in the living room. Her eyes were swollen, but she looked like she had spent the entire night thinking. Nadia walked down. Their eyes met. The tension from last night had softened, but so had the familiarity. I'm sorry, Halima said first. No excuses. Nadia stopped, looked at her for a few seconds. That's something you should have said to yourself first, Nadia replied gently. Because I'm not the only one you hurt. Halima lowered her head. She didn't argue. A small shift, but a real one. About an hour later, Omondi arrived. Calm as always, he greeted everyone and sat down. We're not turning this into a war, he said from the start. But we also can't pretend nothing happened. A very practical approach. Nadia handed him her phone. These are my transactions. Omondi reviewed them carefully. No rush, no emotion. Not a formal contract, he said after a moment, but enough to show financial contribution. Khalid stayed quiet. This time, he didn't interrupt. If this goes to court, it will take time. Omondi continued. But you can reach an agreement beforehand. He looked at Khalid. The question is, do you want to handle this like an adult or let others decide for you? A simple question, but not easy to answer. Khalid exhaled. I don't want this to go that far. Then don't let it begin with avoidance, Nadia said. Silence. Halima suddenly spoke. I think Nadia deserves a fair share. Both of them turned to look at her. For the first time, Halima stood on the side of truth instead of emotion. Khalid looked at her, surprised. Maybe he didn't expect things to shift so quickly. I'll consider it, he said. Not consider, Nadia corrected softly. Decide. Another pause. Finally, Khalid nodded. Slow, but clear. All right, we'll reach an agreement. No one was happy, but it was the first step toward an ending, done the right way. Omondi wrote down the key points. The tension in the room eased slightly. Not because everything was fixed, but because at least things were moving in a direction that could be resolved. Nadia stood up and walked out to the balcony. The morning breeze brushed against her face. Nairobi was still as busy as ever. Behind her, she could hear Khalid and Omondi continuing their discussion. Halima remained silent. For the first time in years, Nadia wasn't thinking about the past. She was thinking about the future. Not a future with someone else, but a future with herself. There are lessons no one wants to learn. But once you do, you can never go back to who you used to be. Do you think women should always maintain control over their own finances? Comment yes or no. In the days that followed, there were no more arguments, no more tense conversations stretching into the night. But the air inside that house grew heavier than ever, heavy with truth that had been spoken, and the fact that no one could pretend anymore. Omondi returned twice more. Each time, he brought documents, clear terms, specific numbers. No emotion, no bias, just fairness. Nadia signed each page, slowly, without hesitation. Not because she didn't feel pain, but because she had already passed through the most painful part. Khalid signed after her. His hand paused slightly at certain points, as if each signature forced him to admit something he had long avoided. But in the end, he signed. An ending, not loud, but clear enough. Halima did not take part in the signing. She sat quietly in a corner. No one asked her to stay, but she didn't leave. Until everything was almost done, she finally stood up. Nadia, she called softly. Nadia looked up. I'm leaving. No one was surprised, but the way she said it without defense, without excuses, made it different. You should have done that earlier, Nadia said. Not cold, just honest. Halima nodded. I know. A moment of silence. I thought I was gaining something, Halima continued. But now I understand. If a relationship begins with dishonesty, it can't stand. Nadia didn't respond, but this time, she didn't turn away either. Some apologies can't fix the past, but they still need to be said, so the one who speaks them can move forward. Halima pulled her suitcase, smaller than Nadia's, lighter in things, but heavier in what she carried inside. When the door closed behind Halima, the house became strangely quiet. Only Nadia and Khalid remained. Two people who were once husband and wife, now standing in the same space, but no longer sharing the same life. Khalid stepped closer. I was wrong, he said. No long explanation. No excuses. Nadia looked at him. Her eyes were no longer searching for anything from him. Yes, she replied. An apology that comes too late often has no power to repair, only to end. Is there any chance? Khalid asked, his voice lower. Nadia didn't answer right away. She looked around the house one last time. Every corner, every detail, a place that was once her dream, now just a closed chapter. You made your choice 2 years ago, she said. I'm just finishing mine. No blame, no bitterness, just a clear answer. Khalid said nothing more. He understood, and this time, he didn't try to change it. That afternoon, Nadia packed her things. Not much. She didn't take the past with her, only what truly belonged to her. As she pulled her suitcase to the door, she paused for a second, not out of hesitation, but to make sure. She wasn't leaving anything behind. Then, she stepped out. Nairobi was still as loud as ever. Traffic, voices, sunlight, nothing had changed. Only Nadia was no longer the same. A few weeks later, everything was finalized. Assets were divided according to agreement. Not perfect, but fair enough to leave no ties behind. Nadia didn't go back abroad. She stayed in Nairobi. She started a small business, home healthcare consulting, built from her own experience. Not easy, but it was hers. No one called her someone's wife anymore. Just Nadia. One evening, as she locked the door of her small office, she looked up at the sky. Orange and purple hues spread across the city. She remembered the day she came back, suitcase in hand, heart full of hope. If she could go back, she wouldn't change a thing. Because that shock brought her back to herself. Some things are lost, not to hurt you forever, but to help you understand what you truly deserve. If you believe that sometimes an ending is actually a better beginning, comment new beginning. There are women who don't realize they are slowly disappearing within their own lives. They love too much, give too much, and believe that if they just try hard enough, one day everything will go back to the way it was. Nadia used to be that kind of woman. She believed sacrifice was the way to hold a home together. But life taught her a very real lesson, that love cannot survive without respect, and silence is often where pain quietly begins to grow. The most painful thing isn't losing a husband. It's realizing that for a long time, she had placed her worth in the hands of someone who didn't know how to value it. But in that very moment, Nadia chose a different path. Not the path of anger or revenge, but the path of clarity, of pausing and asking herself, what do I truly deserve? And when a woman truly understands her worth, she no longer needs to prove it to anyone. Nadia didn't end her story with tears. She ended it with a deep sense of peace. A peace that comes from no longer doubting herself, no longer begging to be loved, no longer shrinking herself to fit into someone else's world. She started again. Not perfect, not easy, but real and truly her own. Life doesn't always give us a beautiful ending, but it always gives us a chance to begin again the right way. And sometimes, walking away isn't a loss. It's the first step to finding yourself again. If you are somewhere on this journey, remember this. You don't have to be strong all the time, but you always deserve to be respected, to be loved, and to be yourself.